Good Saturday morning, everybody, and happy week 3 of the college football season. Welcome into the Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli. He's Matt Scalisi. Matt, we have a game to talk about, finally. A game that we're excited for here in SEC play. Finally, Alabama taking a trip to Gainesville, number 1 versus number 11. In the swamp. Your initial thoughts on this matchup, Matt? 2:30 kickoff on CBS, an exciting one finally for the Tide.
Yeah, this is definitely a step up for Alabama in terms of the intensity of the game, the stakes, everything that's on the line. I think everybody's kind of had this one circled since the start of the season as, I guess no more disrespect than is needed for Miami, but this is a game that I think is in many ways the real start of the season for Alabama. We're going to learn a lot about this team. We're going to learn about Bryce Young and what he's kind of made of, what his, how much his poise really matters in an environment like this where he's in a true road game atmosphere. He's not played in anything remotely close to this in his career. So he's going to learn about himself, and we're going to learn a lot from watching him.
We certainly are, and it's hard to not discuss at least last year's SEC title game. And I understand that the teams are very different than they were a year ago. The personnel is different, especially at quarterback. But still, it's Nick Saban, it's Dan Mullen, two guys. Dan Mullen just has so much swag. He's a guy that just gets so much attention because of who he is, kind of just his entire personality. However, he has never won a game against Nick Saban. He's 0-10. Could this be his opportunity? I mean, there's so much on the line, so much opportunity, I should say, for both of these programs. Could this be Mullen's opportunity to finally get it done?
I think that it's certainly – I think he's probably been circling this one as well all offseason. I mean, you go back and what really kind of stuck out to me as a comparison – and I don't think this – I think Alabama fans hope this does not hold to be true, obviously. But you go back to 2008 for Alabama when Saban was building his program still, and they have this big climactic loss in the SEC championship where they felt they were so close to finally breaking through on the national stage, and they just couldn't get past what at that time was the juggernaut in the SEC, in Florida in that case. I think you could look back at the SEC championship game last year and say, is that a moment for Florida and Dan Mullen where they say, we got so close to being the only team that actually had a shot at beating Alabama, this unbeatable juggernaut? And can he use that as a moment for his program to convince them that they are capable of playing on that level and they can take the next step? Now, it's tough for him to do that this year because he doesn't have a lot of carryover from the team last year, and they have a lot of new pieces. And he's going to need those guys to have spectacular games today.
Yeah. One thing he does have is a 2-quarterback system. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Dan Mullen has done some things in Florida that nobody has accomplished, not even Nick Saban. I mean, 3 straight New Year's Six Bowls in his first 3 seasons with the Gators. There's something to be said for what he has started to build there in Florida. Got to give the guy a little bit of credit. And you look at some of the numbers that we've seen so far this season. Now, I want to be clear that Florida has played FAU and South Florida so far this season. 2 wins for the Gators. Bama, of course, wins against a ranked Miami team in Atlanta and then at home. So when you look at these numbers, what sticks out to you the most, Matt?
Well, obviously, you've got an impressive ground offense for Florida, and I think a lot of that comes from their quarterbacks, which is going to be a big part of what Alabama's defense has cut out for them today. But I also think you look at those defensive performances, and I think both of, you mentioned Florida's competition hasn't been very good so far. Alabama obviously played Mercer last week, which is not a big deal. Miami, we don't really know how good they are. They struggled with Appalachian State last week, but let's say they've both played teams they should have beaten. So far, Alabama's defense, I think, is looking like the best unit on the field going into this game today. Between the 2 defenses and offenses, Alabama's defense, I think, is looking like the best group that will be out there today. The question is, how can they match up against this Florida offense, and can they slow down that rushing attack that obviously is very tricky and has presented problems to Alabama throughout their time under Saban when you have a dynamic rushing quarterback. The other side of the ball is interesting too, though, because I think, as we said, Florida's defense has not been spectacular so far, but this is a very new experience for Bryce Young, for this offensive line that's still learning how to play together. Yeah. Going into the Swamp is a hell of a first challenge as a true road environment. I mean, you can't jump into the pool into much of a deeper end than that.
No doubt. We're going to hear from Bryce Young in just a moment. First, want to hear from Nick Saban. And there's no question that if there's any coach in the country that has coached in big games, it's Nick Saban. He knows how to win. And he was asked this week if there are any memorable ones that stick out the most to him when it comes to matchups. And I think Coach's response is one that you would expect, but one that also explains why he is as great as he is. And here's what he had to say.
Oh, 1 second here, Simone. Sorry.
We're going to do that in just a second. We got a couple score predictions in the comments as well.
Oh, do we?
13, 49, 28. All right. Well, that's put some points on the board there. We'll see if Florida can actually do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Comment here from Oscar talking about the two quarterback system that we've seen from Florida. Richardson definitely won't. Anthony Richardson, Emory Jones, those two guys that have put up some big numbers. So that'll be interesting to see. Nick Saban did say this week that he doesn't have to prepare differently for these two guys because even though they are two separate players, they play very similarly. They're both threats in the passing game. They're both threats on the ground as well. So Saban, I feel like he feels pretty confident in their preparation. And Matt, you said a moment ago that the defense for this unit, for this Tide defense, has been fantastic so far this season. They expect to take that on the road to the Swamp.
Yeah, I do have that Saban clip for you at this point. So hang on.
Okay, great. We're gonna pull.
Well, the one that means the most is always the one that's coming up next because that's the one you're focused on. That's the one you're thinking about. I don't really think a lot about. I guess the ones I remember the most are the ones we didn't have success in and tried to figure out why. So, but I can't really say that there was any one that was more memorable than others. Obviously, when you win a championship game, you're always playing against a good team, and there's a lot at stake. And, when you win them, you feel great, and they're great. And when you lose them, you feel horrible. So, but that's what competitive sports are all about.
All right, so Coach, what I love about that answer is that the ones that stick out to him are the losses. This just goes to show
he
hates losing more than he even loves to win, and God knows he wins a lot. But no game is too big for Nick Saban. He knows it's a big opportunity for the younger pieces of his program to go in and make a statement in SEC play on the road in a hostile environment. But at the end of the day, it's another game, and that I think Coach made that very, very clear this week.
Yeah, that's something we've heard from him before. I think that's part of what distinguishes Alabama as a program from other great programs is they hate losing. And he actually had kind of a different, interesting take on that on Thursday night on his radio show this week, where he was actually specifically talking about the fan base. And he gets on y'all every once in a while. He decides that the fans are going to be the people he needs to coach sometimes.
You're getting complacent.
Yeah, and what he said this week was that basically he needs the fans to not take winning for granted. I think you can infer from his comments that maybe he's worried that the fans are drifting this way a little bit. But he basically said, if you don't remember what it feels like to lose, you're not going to take winning as seriously, and you're not going to value it as highly because it's something that you expect. And it's I think that, not to say that Saban's trying to prepare people for a loss, but I think he is aware sometimes that when the fans don't seem hyped up for what is really a very big game like this one, he might need to motivate the fans a little bit. He might need to get in y'all's heads a little bit and say, look, if you don't think this game is worth being excited about, remember what it feels like to lose a game like this.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's kind of almost an appreciation type. Hey,
Yeah.
enjoy the wins, because not everybody wins as much as Alabama, obviously. So I think the Tide fans,
Nobody does.
and nobody wants. Obviously, but I think that Tide fans, they get used to wins, and Saban's mind, complacent is the word that comes to mind a lot. But a guy that has really been impressive for Alabama so far, granted against the two teams they have played, not really necessarily a top 10 caliber type programs, but is Bryce Young. And I understand that they might have the stiffest competition so far, but what he has been able to do in terms of composure, Matt, has been extremely impressive from a first-year starter. Every single time we have the opportunity to hear from this young man in the media, I am just like blown away by him. I have been impressed at every single turn. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, he's definitely, I think, a good example of the younger generation of player that is coming up already used to kind of living your life in public. He's obviously reached a different level of celebrity now that he's at Alabama, but recruits
making like $1 million.
Yeah, I mean he was rich before he played a game here. Recruits are also just, I think this isn't new. This has been the case for 15 or so years now, but they do a lot of interviews. Media is not as rare a thing for them anymore. And I think in some ways there's negatives that come with that, but in some ways also it does prepare you for life as a professional athlete. And I think the other aspect of this is a lot of kids Bryce Young's age are very used to just living their lives in public anyway because of social media. It's just a part of how kids grow up now. So I think it's been interesting to see him just sort of walk into this job and not be rattled by that part of it. As you know, Alabama is very hesitant usually to let us talk to first-year players. And even though Bryce played a little bit last year, he's very much a new face, but doesn't seem like a first-year starter when you hear him in press conferences.
Yeah, they're proud to walk him out there and let him address the media. And he was asked about his composure and how he kind of does get it done on the field and away from the football as well. Here's what he had to say about that.
Definitely times that, I feel like there's a lot of improvement that I can have in that area. But, it's really a culmination of a lot of things. I think off the field, it's a lot about how I was raised. I was blessed to have two great parents that have raised me really well. And, to this day are people that, that I get to lean on. And that's a real blessing. And, on the field, I think it comes with reps. I think it comes with preparation and intensity and practice and, in times that aren't the Saturdays. And I think that's where really the poise comes from, because I think it's really a product of your confidence. And therefore, I think that confidence is a product of preparation.
Pretty impressive words there, in my opinion. When we look at what he's done so far on the field and off the field, I think that impresses me more than anything, Matt. Is just to be able to hear a guy just be as calm as he is. He's going into a hostile environment. He knows it's going to be a big challenge, and he's not afraid to admit that. But he also says, "Hey, I have confidence, and I've been able to prove on the field that we can put an offense out there that we're proud of, that we have weapons around me, and guys have rallied around him." That's what's also impressive, is that people have bought into this young man and his talent and his leadership. And that really says a lot about a young guy and what he's able to do and make the type of impression that he's making on a program.
It does seem like the rest of the offense is bought in on Bryce Young and feels good about him. We have not seen, even through frustration. I mean, you look at the start of that game last week, the offense got off to a pretty sloppy start. Yeah. Didn't seem to me like there was frustration among the ranks. There wasn't guys getting in each other's faces about it. They stayed calm and got back to doing what they do. I think we'll, again, today the pressure is ratcheted up. Today, if something goes wrong early in this game,
sure,
the reaction that's going to happen to these guys is going to feel very different, because when you make a mistake, you're going to hear 90,000 people roar about it, and it's going to get in your head. There's no way it couldn't. So the question is, how do you deal with it when that happens? When something does go wrong, and you have to assume something will, do you let it get to you? Do you let it affect you negatively, or do you keep your head, get back with your teammates, settle back down, and go back out there and do your job the way you're supposed to do it? So I think it's one of those things where you kind of can't truly know how somebody's going to react until you see it happen in real time.
Mhm. Again, another huge opportunity for Bryce Young to take the next step. This is kind of what separates the good from the great, is being able to handle situations like this, to not get rattled, to be able to go into a situation and stay calm and have that composure throughout. When you look at the quarterback situation at Florida, should be known this is not a quarterback controversy. They do, in fact, just have a 2-quarterback system in Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson, 2 guys who are very similar. Richardson kind of the bigger of the 2 when it comes to size, but both putting up some pretty solid numbers, both very capable quarterbacks in the air and on the ground. And Dan Mullen has made it clear this is just kind of the way that they're going to roll. And a lot of folks, a lot of programs can't do this. And it will be interesting to see if this can continue into SEC play for Florida, or if this is just something they're able to kind of test the waters in not a stiff competition, but at the end of the day, they need to kind of stick with one guy. We will see at 2:30 today, Matt.
Yeah, there's also kind of an interesting history if you go back to Florida in the 90s. This is a thing that Steve Spurrier used to do a lot. I think that Dan Mullen would certainly say that that Steve Spurrier has been a big influence on his career. So an interesting kind of parallel, I think, to the Florida teams that Bama fans know and remember from the 90s. But sometimes it can lead to positive things. Sometimes it can also lead to tension on the team. And I think we've seen examples of that at Alabama too. Yeah. The issue I think that Florida is facing right now, regardless of how Dan Mullen wants to portray it, is that there is a younger guy on this roster that probably most people on the team, and certainly in the fan base at Florida, think should be the guy. They think that this is the guy for them and should be in the future. And there's a more experienced guy who I think maybe Dan Mullen feels like is less likely to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Even though he's a little bit less dynamic offensively. And Dan Mullen seems to want to stick with that guy. So you've got this kind of classic, not totally unlike the situation we saw a few years ago, where you have the stable returning starter in Jalen Hurts, and you have the new guy in Tua Tagovailoa, who I think everybody at that time was sort of speculating, hey, maybe we could do a little bit more if this guy was back there.
Sure.
That doesn't though always mean that the older guy is not the right option, and maybe the situation that Dan Mullen is worried about is, yes, maybe I could do more with this younger guy, but I'm about to play Alabama with a ton of returning defensive starters, one of the greatest defensive minds in the history of the sport. Maybe I need to put the more solid guy out there that is less likely to make a mistake for me. Yeah. So those thoughts are all going to be echoing inside Dan Mullen's head during this game today, I think.
Yeah, ultimately that's why they get paid a lot of money to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Pay a lot of money to watch those decisions be made. So, but speaking of decisions and prepping for these Florida quarterbacks, Saban spoke briefly on his thoughts when it comes to the dual threat or the 2-quarterback system that Florida has, what they're going to look at here in the Swamp at 2:30.
They do have a 2-quarterback system. I don't think you prepare differently. Both guys have ability to make plays passing, and they run the same sort of quarterback runs with both guys, and both guys are very talented in both areas. So, when the quarterback can run and they run quarterback runs, it's almost like playing against Wildcats. So they've got an extra blocker, but they also have the ability to make big plays in the passing game, which they've made, and been pretty efficient in the passing game.
So Anthony Richardson and Emory Jones are the leading rushers on the team for Florida. Anthony Richardson with 275 on the ground, Emory Jones 155. So really it's just a matter of contain for Alabama. And it's not like I have to sit here and try to be Pete Golding and explain to the Tide what it is that they have to do. But just from my little knowledge of being able to watch football, it's just a matter of keeping guys in front of you.
Yeah, you got to get off blocks. You have to make sure.
Coach Matt, get it done.
But you got to look. It is very simple though with a running quarterback. It sounds simple anyway. I mean, you still have to execute, which is really hard to do. Yeah. But you have to make sure that you blow up the running lane for this quarterback before it comes open. You have to not give them the opportunity. And I think having Will Anderson out there today is going to be pretty important for Alabama. We don't know for sure that he's going to be out there. Saban has sounded very optimistic about it all week. But, I mean, it's never more important to have a great guy on the edge of your defensive line than in a game like this, where they have to contain the running game in the backfield, or else it could get away from them real quickly. So I think Will Anderson being out there or not today could actually make a pretty big difference in this game.
Jeff Stapleton's confident defense will stay on Richardson like white on rice. He won't be able to breathe, much less run. So that'll be interesting to watch. Kickoff set for 2:30. If you're just tuning in right now, it's the Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. He's Matt. I'm Simone. You look throughout the rest of college football, Matt, when it comes to games. Interesting is the word that you use to describe all the games outside the one that I think is actually something that everyone in this state and throughout college football will be interested to watch once Bama is done at Florida, and that's Auburn and Penn State, a 6:30 kickoff. We're not going to spend too much time talking about the Tigers, but still something interesting when it comes to what the landscape of college football looks like down the road, because at the end of the day, when playoffs are decided, when the rankings are decided, the committee looks back at games from week 3. I mean, it matters. It matters. Your entire body of work, as they love to say, matters. So this game for Alabama at Florida matters. This game for Auburn at Penn State matters. And really, those are the top 2 games really today in total.
For sure. I mean, it's hard to find too many others that are as big as this in college football today. And, you know, I think obviously Alabama fans are going to be watching the Penn State Auburn game. I no shame in admitting that. It's a huge deal, and it will affect probably a lot of the conversations you have at the water cooler next week. So it's a big one. I really don't know what to think of it at this point, and you know, we still have a pregame show to do on that one, Simone. So I don't know right now how that game is.
Quickly, Matt.
I really think that seems like a game that could go either way, which is exciting to me going into it. I don't have an expectation of who's going to win that game right now. You know, there's a couple of other games in the SEC that are not nearly as important as those two, but that are at least interesting to me and that I will keep an eye on. And one of those is Tulane versus Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. Now, Ole Miss is the obvious favorite in that game, but Tulane has had an interesting year so far. They've actually been kind of this roving band of nomads. They have not been able to be at home. They've been actually living in Birmingham for a lot of the season so far. They played one of their home games here at Legion Field in Birmingham. And they, as a lot of you probably know, they put a scare into Oklahoma in week 1. So they seem like a pretty good team. They seem like maybe somebody that could challenge Ole Miss in that game. And the other one that I've got my eye on is Mississippi State Memphis, and that is a regional rivalry. Memphis hates every team from Mississippi, and they get really fired up about playing them. And I think Mississippi State is vulnerable. I think that team right now is absolutely capable of losing a game against a decent mid-major team like Memphis, let alone the fact that it's in Memphis. It's in the Liberty Bowl. So that's going to be an interesting one for me.
So a couple interesting games throughout the SEC, with the biggest ones to keep an eye on, obviously, the 2:30 game, Alabama and Florida, number 1 versus number 11 at the Swamp. Going to be a fun one. 2:30 kickoff on CBS, the first SEC on CBS game of the week. So we're definitely looking forward to that. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in. The Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. He's Matt. I'm Simone. We will see you guys for the postgame show after the 2:30 kickoff. Have a great day.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart